Thank you very much. Also, thank you for organizing that in this beautiful city. This is a really astonishing place to be. Thank you. I also need to apologize because I had to present a different paper that would have perfect links to the content of the workshop, but we're currently having some data issues, so I didn't dare. Sorry. Do you need to? Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. So I'm apologizing for the different topic, but the other paper I originally wanted to present, we are waiting for the better data, and before the better data is here, I didn't want to present it, but next year I'm going to present it. It's going to be a really cool one. Anyhow, I'm going to tell you something today about a survey experiment, but not only survey experiment, but we actually want to understand what people really know and really understand. We come from an economic point of view. We will think about the mechanisms and people are behaving according to the incentives and the mechanism. We try to encourage them to behave, but do they actually get it? And I'm not always so sure whether how much people actually know, not even about very basic kind of correlations and mechanisms. So what we actually do is here that we try to understand how much normal people, actually population representative people in different European countries, do understand the links between monetary policy and housing prices in general. And do people that are concerned by it understand it? So those who have mortgages, but also those who maybe want to become homeowners, like renters, that may be just on the jump to become homeowners, or are they not able to? We'll also actually look at people that are renting under favorable terms, including rent control apartments and so on. Are they maybe the worst educated ones? Because they may never plan to switch to become a homeowner. That would kind of be logical that they also know the least about it. So we actually try to understand what do people understand about the connection between this inflationary circle and house prices in general. So this is what we actually test in 5 different European countries. So it's very descriptive in some way, but kind of shows you roughly what 2 people get and what can you actually not really expect them to understand. Okay, a lot of theory, economic theory, would actually show you several channels, how monetary policy and house market, how are they interlinked? What is affecting what? We know that when interest rates are falling, usually then cost of borrowing is usually falling, given that the majority of households would use mortgages for buying housing. That means that they are less credit constrained by that. And that should actually increase the demand for housing, and that should, in the longer phase, then lead to increasing house prices. So that is probably the not very controversial channel most people would have in mind. Yes, so this is a bit the idea in general, and we just try to understand, do people get it or not? Okay, we do this survey experiment at a very macroeconomically speaking interesting point in time. When you remember, we just had inflation, right? You probably remember. And we do the survey just after the peak of the highest inflation rates. So the black dashed line is actually the point in time where we did run the survey. And we actually see that house prices were already falling since quite a while. Inflation just started to fall, and policy rates were still super high, right? So that was a very special scenario. So people, if they become aware of it by experience of such a fate, it should be that time where they should start to get the channels actually, because they're just living through it, so to say. Okay. Yes, so that's what I said before in the first slide. How is that actually perceived by the public? So those people that are really the decision makers, it's not economists. We probably have 1 or 2 in the sample, I guess, but it's really ordinary people. Okay, so whom do we look at? So we do an interactive web survey or web experiment, however you want to call it. We have roughly 30,800 participants from different countries. So we have Austria and Germany. 1 of the 2 would have been enough, but I'm Austrian, so we wanted to include Austria, sorry. And then also Italy, Sweden, and the UK also have different types of housing markets in the sample and different types. And particularly when you think about the UK is probably the least regulated rental market in Europe. So they are absolutely free market, right? That is not true for the others. And then you have the Austro-German are the rent fanatics, so to say, right? So they really go for that. Italy and Sweden are somewhere in between. Again, May 2023. And then we just asked them about general literacy, a lot of economic literacy, actually, financial literacy, including monetary policy literacy, including housing market and rental market literacy, and connections. Okay, so we have several things. So we ask them question by question, and people just give their intuition, and we just track that. So the first question is, what do people think about general monetary policy? So whenever there is ECB written there, we would obviously, each participant sees the relevant central bank, right? So people from Sweden would say the Riksbank, and the English people would see the Bank of England and so on, but I just put the ECB here for easier notation. So how would they actually react? What are actually they're deciding? So when they decide that the key policy interest rate is going up, what do you actually expect for yourself? So that's just classical monetary policy, okay, because it should mean that also my own mortgage rates I'm paying or the own interest rates I'm earning should go up. Interestingly, not all get it right, but still roughly 60%. But I mean, even the most basic idea is only roughly 60% of the people actually get it. And it's also interesting that quite a large share even state, I don't know. So they are at least aware that they have no clue, but several won't just say anything else, right? And that is quite a sizable share. So the first idea is actually, so even the most basic channel is not really understood by people. And then we just go on. What about not just conventional monetary policy, but unconventional monetary policy? So what about asset purchasing programs? When the same is happening, what would you expect the ECB would do? That's really bad, right? So we can actually conclude that a vast majority has no clue how that mechanism may ever work, right? So people really have no clue, although we have now lived through a period where unconventional monetary policy was actually done a lot in all these countries, but apparently the public has not really realized that this is going on. Okay. So overall, when you put the two questions together, who are the experts? And the experts that have both correct, 10%, right? 10%, that's no one, almost no one. No. That's a bit problematic. Again, many would still get conventional monetary policy roughly right, but when it comes to unconventional, yeah, problematic. Okay, we have lots of heterogeneity, and the heterogeneity is actually really interesting because it tells you also something that buying a house is apparently an educational program for people. So owner-occupiers, particularly those with mortgages, are actually the best. So they seem to understand a bit better. Renters are really, they know nothing, one can really say. So this is actually very interesting that by just not being exposed to the market really also means, okay, I really don't understand that. And also you have a handshake age effect, which makes totally sense. First, you're too young, then you may consider buying, so you should know a bit more, and then it goes on. Okay, but I probably should go on a bit faster. We have lots of country heterogeneity and so on, but not too much actually when it comes to that. Okay. Yes, and that's the heterogeneity of get you both questions right, and we can actually see that in pretty much all countries, it's a minority, or actually in all countries, it's a minority of people who get both questions right. Okay, but now what we're really interested is the connection to house prices. So the main question here is first, just in general, do you think there is a connection between interest rates I have to pay to credit institution when taking out a mortgage and the price of housing? Is there a connection? 3/4 actually say, yeah, there is a link. right? So just in general, no clue what kind of link, but there is a link. At least the majority would say yes, there is something. That's good, right? We also, just to make sure it makes sense, ask the questions always in 2 ways, and only then take those people that answer the same consistently across those questions, and not just randomly picking any questions, but it's quite symmetric. So this is actually very good. And then what is really interesting is the way how to maybe solve that. So if you know that people don't know so much, can you actually help them by giving them extra information and kind of education by experts? Would that help for communication? That would be a bit of an maybe strategy how to do that. So in general, there's a lot of research and effort done by central banks in general into communication, how to educate people about what they are doing. Because at the end, monetary policy only works if people are also reacting as they should, so to say, right? So that's a bit the idea. So communication is kind of key. And so the question is, can expert knowledge actually shape? Are people willing to accept the information they get and accepting the education they get? And what kind of information, what kind of expertise knowledge maybe can influence their perception most? So we do a small randomized information treatment here too, that we're actually searching for experts' quotes where they explain in easy terms what is actually going on in terms of house prices and interest rate disconnection, and then just see whether people are willing to adjust their beliefs, so to say, based on experts' knowledge, or are they not willing to follow that kind of education. Okay, so as said, we do search for quotes that were really stated by people and just give this information additional with pictures about that and sources and the links they can click for about the full source and so on. So here a central banker, so the deputy governor from the Taiwan central bank explains this connection in this public statement. And then people are actually shown their previous answer. And then they are asked whether they want, in light of the new information, want to update the information or whether they want to keep it like that. So people can also keep it like that. They don't have to, just if they don't want to, right? And then we do the same for a team of researchers that actually publish a paper about that. Again, quote the source and things like that, and just test what is working better. So what is happening? First, those people that were right in the first place, the majority stays with their answer. That's good. They should not switch to their opposite answer, but in the light of getting new information. However, a quite large share of 20% is not willing to update their beliefs, so to say, given the new information. However, a bit less than 20% heeds, right? And then there are the reverse people that have it right and then switch to wrong. They hope like that somehow. So I don't know, this is a bit strange. But at least a little bit, you can manipulate or push people towards the right answer by giving them a bit more information and background information. Yeah, roughly 70%. And then we can actually assess who are those people who are willing to switch and who not. And that is actually interesting because there's huge country-specific differences. We have not seen country-specific heterogeneity so much for other questions, but here it's really stark. And we actually see that particularly the Swedes, they are really happy to adjust their opinions given experts' knowledge, no matter which experts actually. So they are willing to follow, so to say, which is also totally in line with a lot of research on, in general, behavior of people. And in the Europe barometer survey that is conducted every year, the Swedish are actually those that are most likely to follow expertise, knowledge, and trusting to institutions. That is perfectly in line. And the most skeptical are actually the Germans, which is also not really surprising because they are very often those who are stating that the institutions and so expertise are not always to be trusted. So this is actually interesting. Overall, maybe also particularly for the, this is a bit, here the switching behavior, sorry. What also do we find? So when we look at researchers versus central bankers, researchers are better, right? So people trust researchers more than central bankers. I mean, I fully agree, but I mean, central bankers would not always agree. And then there are also interesting heterogeneity. So women tend to trust also much more than men. It's harder to catch men, which is particularly for experts' knowledge. And yeah, that has much more. So I didn't write all the shoot. Yeah, and the difference between research and central, no, I said it already, is I love like that. I didn't put the full country results, but it's actually interesting that you can really map down the profile of people who are willing to trust and those not. And what is also interesting in general that, particularly for this group here, it's not just that people that have a mortgage are the best, yes. We also know that there's a certain age frame where people are better than in other times. So very old people are not good, but very young, and by old I mean like 50 plus or so. And people before they are 25, they're also really bad. And when they are renting, they tend to be rather bad, and particularly bad when they are not renting on market terms. So those people are also really not very good. So what are the conclusions? Actually, what is the most striking and quite surprising for me is that the general literacy is really low. I did expect that there would be actually many more people understand that and these mechanisms. And even conventional monetary policy that has been around for many years, it's only understood by roughly 2/3 of the respondents. But again, buying a house is probably the most important education influence you can do. So that would be actually maybe everyone should buy a house because by that you learn a lot. Questionable conclusion, but anyhow, but that is obviously a way where people first learn about that. And again, renters, not really, young people, not really. And again, particularly by distinguishing rent on market prices or renting under some kind of subsidized or controlled regimes, they are diverse. Irresponsive of education, right, when you factor it out. And then again, information provided by the academic is also more important than central bankers. And and so actually we can map many differences and also give recommendations on what should probably be done better, and maybe also using different communication channels to also reach those currently underserved population in terms of information campaigns, simply because they are apparently not reached by the massive amounts of money actually central banks are using to try to communicate directions and why their rents are going up and why prices are going up or falling, and what's the link with interest, to kind of have a bit more informed population. So this is a bit overall, and again, there's no kind of causal effect or whatever, but really just to understand how much do the people, ordinary people, actually understand about this linkage. And that's everything I wanted to say. Thank you very much.